Hi everyone, Dr. Saborski here, picking up where Dr. Starling left off at physical development in early adulthood, slide 13. She let me know that this is where you guys stopped your course last week. So we're going to talk and pick up about biological aging in early adulthood. So there are a couple different things that occur when we are in early adulthood, which is the time period that we're all in right now. As far as the level of tissues and organs are concerned, we have a few things that happen. First of all, we have something called the cross-linkage theory of aging that occurs. And this is basically that our connective tissues start to become a little bit less elastic than they have been in the past. Um, so this leads to things happening like our flexibility can change in our body, in our skin and other organs. Um, there's different things that start to occur with these fibers breaking down. And basically, if you keep yourself healthy and you keep yourself exercising and you have a good diet, these things tend to happen a little bit less. Now, if you're living an unhealthy lifestyle, you're going to be more impacted by this stuff happening in your body. Um, some other things that can occur, your endocrine system starts to change, and that's the part of your body that produces and regulates your hormones. Some things that we notice happen with endocrine failure. This is one of the things that goes on when we have menopause. There's hormone changes and there's differences in the development of hormones and things get disrupted. For example, our growth hormone starts to decrease, and this can lead to loss of muscle and bone mass and cause slowing of different things happening in the body. It can lead to decline in cardiovascular functioning. But once again, these are things that, diet and physical activity can limit these aspects of biological aging. There's also declines in the immune system. We can have more likelihood as we age to get infectious diseases and things like cancer. If you've ever noticed, it's more likely to get things like cancer as you age. However, once again, as far as this is concerned, healthy, keeping yourself healthy and moving are really big helps for this. So moving on to physical changes that happen as we get older. During the 20s and 30s, changes in our physical appearance are very gradual, and we really don't notice things much. And there are some things that do occur as we get older, and we're going to go over some of these now. As far as our heart and lungs and motor performance are concerned, um, there's a lot less heart disease now than there used to be over the past 25 years because we have better health care and there's improved diet and exercise. And better medical detection of issues that go on with the cardiovascular system. So honestly, in this age range, there aren't a lot of age-related changes. There are some age-related changes with the lungs, but once again, this is not really, this doesn't occur so much when it's with individuals that are healthy, but things that happen are like during physical exertion, when your respiratory volume decreases and your breathing rate increases with age. And we do lose a little bit of lung capacity as we get older. After the age of 25, it declines by 10%. But honestly, this doesn't really impact us that much because we don't really use all of our capacity to begin with. And as for motor capacity, most athletic skills peak between the ages of 20 and 35, and then they start to decline. But once again, this is something that as long as we are doing our best and keeping healthy and eating well, this should not cause too much difficulty in our early adulthood. Moving on to the immune system. The capacity of our immune system to offer protection against diseases, it increases in adolescence, but then we start to see a decline in our 20s. This is mostly due to changes in our thymus, which is more active during our teenage years and then starts to shrink until it's barely even noticeable by the time we get to 50. So our thymic hormones reduce, and the thymus doesn't promote maturity and differentiation of T cells like it used to. Um, and along with that, our B cells are released far more when there are T cells present. So, because of all these changes with the thymus, the immune response is compromised a bit as we age. And along with this, something that we may have all noticed, especially coming up to the end of the semester, is that stress is related to our immune system. So the more stressed out we are, the more that impacts our immune system, and we are more likely to get ill when we are feeling incredibly stressed out. Our immune system is reduced by physical stress, from mental stress, and during our early adulthood, we tend to have more stress put on our systems than we have previously because of things like college and jobs and things like that. As far as reproductive capacity is considered, we've noticed that there's been some trends as far as young adults are concerned. Um, Typically, in the past, there used to be that women would have their first children earlier. As you can see in this chart, in the 1970s, about 75% of women were having children in the ages of 20 to 24. Um, but that has changed as women are more likely to go through further education and um, focus on careers and things like that. So we're now seeing more likelihood that um, first births are happening later in life um, because of the changes in our society. So here's another slide looking at cohort differences um, based on age and the year of birth, and how old the mother was at first birth. Here's another one. And you can see that there's some differences based on state and differences based on nation. Okay, so moving on to health and fitness. Sorry, this is a little dry, guys. This is honestly, I'm all happy to take over for Dr. Starling, but talking about adulthood for me is the least exciting part of this course. I really, really enjoy talking about the infancy and toddlerhood and early childhood stages. Um, so I'll do my best to try to make this at least a little bit interesting. Okay, so we're going to talk about health and fitness going on in the early adulthood years. So something very exciting, U.S. death rates in early adulthood are higher than other industrialized nations. This is based on several different things. So I'm kind of going to breeze through this a little bit. And the reason that we have higher death rates is due likely to a whole bunch of different factors. We have higher likelihood of poverty and obesity in our country than in other countries. Our gun control policies are more lenient, which can lead to difficulties. Um, and we don't have universal health insurance in the United States. So those who are of lower SES, they may not have the ability to get insurance. Of course, this has changed a little bit in the past, but still the ability to get care the way that some people may need is still limited. So here are some graphs about socioeconomic status and health. Income, education, and occupational status are correlated with health. So those who have higher education tend to do better health-wise than those who are of lower education. As far as being overweight and obese, you can also see that there is a higher trend in obesity in our country than there used to be. So there's several different reasons that obesity is more prevalent currently than it used to be. There is obviously a hereditary component that was discussed previously in this course. But along with that, there's things like we don't need physical labor as as much as we used to. There's not as much physical labor in home, there's not as much physical labor in the workplace. And generally, a lot more adults are sedentary when they used to be much more active. Along with that, there's a lot more processed foods, and we're consuming more calories than we used to, especially things like sugar and fat. And this has risen over the 20th century and early 21st century, and with a really big increase after the 1970s. Um, So obviously, having being overweight or obese has some serious consequences. It can lead to more health problems. There's a lot more social stigma against those who are overweight or obese. It's linked to difficulties with health. It's linked to difficulties with mental health, and so on. So obviously, with treatment for obesity, there should be something that involves lasting behavior change. Families should really work on this early in their homes and make sure that as their children age, that this is not a problem. Um, but There, obviously crash diets and things like that are not the best treatments for obesity. It should be things that encourage lifestyle changes, increase in exercise that's doable, things like that. And honestly, one of the best things for both physical and psychological health is exercise. There's been a lot of studies that have happened more recently where we're looking at things like anxiety and depression and the way people are feeling and well being in general, and finding that one of the best treatments for somebody who is not feeling great psychologically is exercise. And this is an issue because only about 30% of our population get enough exercise. Most people have difficulty getting out there and doing what they need to do. Now, on to substance use and abuse. Um, we see that there's a peak in the 19 to 25-year-old population of using alcohol and drug use. Obviously, there's a lot going on in life now for people. They've moved on from high school. A lot of the population is in college. We see that there's an increase because the legal drinking age is 21 and things like that. So why, among other things, there's a large increase in this population of using alcohol and drugs. A lot of it is because before settling down to the responsibilities that go along with adulthood, people tend to be more likely to try cigarettes and chew tobacco. There's an increase in marijuana use and also things like taking stimulants to enhance cognitive or physical performance. Also in college, it's more likely that, there's more binge drinking and things like that that occur at parties and things like that. Um, as far as smoking is concerned, obviously we've discovered that smoking can be quite harmful to one's health. There has been a decline in smoking, especially in college graduates, but there's not a lot of change through history of those who did not finish high school. There are more men than women who smoke, but it's a small gender gap as far as smoking is concerned. So obviously, smoking includes a lot of different pollutants. There are a lot of things that it can cause issues with. There's ingredients in cigarette smoke include things like nicotine and tar and carbon monoxide, among other chemicals, and they leave damage throughout the body. There are lots of interesting graphics and videos out there if you do a search for what lungs look like after smoking, and it blackens the lungs and makes, among other things, causes a lot of different issues physically. So, on to alcohol. Obviously, things like genetics and culture and personality all influence alcoholism rates. Surveys usually show that about 10% of men and 3% of women in the United States are heavy drinkers, and about one third are alcoholics, meaning people who cannot limit their alcohol use. For men, that usually starts early in the teens and early 20s and worsens. And women, it's usually later in the 20s and 30s and has a more variable course. Most alcoholics, or many alcoholics, also use a lot of other substances, including nicotine and other drugs. Oops, I didn't mean to go all the way forward, but that's okay. Um, so obviously, alcohol affects your body quite a bit. It's a depressant. It stops your ability to control your thoughts and actions. Um, and some individuals they drink because of it helps with anxiety, but then it actually induces anxiety as the effect of alcohol wears off and can make anxiety actually worse. It can also do a lot of physical damage throughout the body, leading to things like liver disease, cardiovascular issues, and then inflammation of things like the pancreas, irritating the intestinal tract, and just causing a whole lot of other problems. With really a large amount of alcohol use over time, there can be even brain damage that occurs. Uh, So, if somebody does have issues with alcohol, there are a lot of successful treatments that can be used now. There's obviously AA and things like that, but there are also harm reduction strategies which can be used. There's a type of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy that can help individuals that have substance use issues move past this in a behavioral way as well. So that's it for the early adulthood section of physical development in early adulthood. I'm hoping that this wasn't too dry. I'm going to start doing the cognitive slides next. It's kind of awkward starting in the middle of a presentation, so thank you for bearing with me, and hopefully this was helpful to you guys as you were moving forward in the course. Thanks.